So I'm Professor John Wagoner over at Bossier Parish Community College. I teach the fine arts classes, so Introduction to Visual Arts, Art History 1 and 2. Some people know me for teaching the painting class with dual enrollment students. I've even taught color theory, and it's online this semester, and we can talk more about that. And then I've also taught ceramics, drawing, art for elementary teachers, all the fun art classes that we offer. And some of the things that I really liked about teaching, was the inspiration and motivation you gave to these students. It was the knowledge that they were sort of craving for, and you could give them the answers to those questions. And you didn't really give them the answer to the question. It was more of their development to that answer. So you're just sort of guiding them along this path. And I always joke and tell them that my job is for you to learn how to sink or swim. And if you sink, I'm going to teach you how to float. And so that kind of helps them feel a little bit, a little bit more familiar and not so afraid. And also telling them, to learn from their failures, because I tell them to fail well and fail often in order to succeed. And when they hear that, they're like, the teacher's telling us to fail. And it sort of wakes them up, and they start to realize this. And one of the things for me, going back to the question of like why, I love teaching everything, especially it changed when I came to BPCC, is because it was more developed into the actual wording, Bossier Parish Community College. And I could get that sense of community. The students are so tied, they're so local, rather than some universities and things like that. The students would actually integrate more with other students that are there. You'd have the non-traditional students, or you'd have the students that are the dual enrollment kids. They're in high school and they're learning at the same time. And it's really cool because they're learning off of one another, and that's sort of the gap that comes in between them all, especially in an art class, because everybody's so friendly. They look at each other's paintings or, what they're working on, or like a survey course, and they're talking about art. They're like, that's not art. Or they'll say, hey, my grandmother's painting gourds. What do you think of this? And then there's like this big open debate, and it becomes this essence of a micro community in the classroom. And then after that class is over, that community just slowly grows, because that student will be in this class, and then this student will be in that class, and then they might overlap in another one. But it does become, again, that essence, as much as I can just beat that word to death, community. And I think that pairs really well for this location. So for anybody that's wanting to take an art class or wondering why they should take an art class and the fears for that, I would say, first off, it's an art class. There's so many various topics that you can relate to. You don't have to have any experience whatsoever. One of the things that I really love to tell my students, and I just did this in class the other day, is that we're all in this innate experience of wanting to create. Like, why do we make art? That's always my first discussion. And I have the students answer those questions, and they don't really think about that. And if you think about why there is this sort of need, or I wouldn't say an urgency to create, but we do have this innate feeling that we want to create in general. And then as we get older, it kind of tapers off. And I'm using my example. I have a 2-year-old son. If I give him just a table, I put some paper out and crayons, he's drawing, he's as happy as he can be. He's not really drawing anything. It's just strokes, circles, random things. And he might be making some sort of symbols or something. I'm not quite sure, but he's happy doing it. And I don't take that away from him. If I do, it's like, oh, time to be done. And then it goes away. But for him, it's that innate process. Like, he sees those crayons. I want to do it. There it is. There's that feeling. And for the people that stopped doing that, they probably got older and they saw somebody else drawing a little bit better than they did, or they painted or created something that looked better than they did. And there's that intimidation. They're like, well, I give up. And what are they going to do? They're going to stop making art. And so then they come back into my classes, thinking about getting their feet wet. And that whole idea is sort of jumping in, being scared, make those mistakes, learn from them. My painting students, when they have their first canvas in front of them, and I turn on the music and they've got their still life or their painting assignment, whatever they're going to paint, and they hesitate. They've got all their paints out, they have all their brushes, and they just sit there and they look at this blank canvas, and they're so scared. They don't want to make a mark, that pristine white canvas, because once they put it down, it's real. But what they don't realize is that paint dries, we can cover it over. Nobody knows it except for like me and that person. But I would sometimes go over and get their hand and dip it in like a big, glob of red paint. And I'd say, okay, let's make that mark. And I just put that mark right in the middle of the canvas. And then it's this freeing emotion that they realize that, hey, there's no mistakes. I can do this. And some of it can also be, he ruined my canvas. I need to correct this thing. But it gives them that motivation, so they can see that, one, you can do this. Two, it's easily fixed. We learn from this, and how do we go? And so that sort of opens it up. And once they see one student do that, they see them, oh, they made that mistake. Now I know what to do. There's that example. And so I find that they lead more than I do in that class, even though I am the leader. But that's one of the things, taking an art class, it frees up your mind, especially during this time. We're in the pandemic. A lot of the students that I taught for painting classes online, they said it was sort of a relief, combined with all their other online classes, that this is different, because it is a different mindset. I don't want to say that you don't have to study as much, but you have to put in the time and the effort within your creativity. And that's different than just, doing math or writing an essay. They're all different forms of creativity. But for this one, in all these studio classes, it definitely opens it up to a whole new world that they may not be thinking of. And it's a little bit of a refresher, so they can take a step back and see what they could possibly get into. So the question being, why should we take an art class if your degree is in nursing or in STEM? And this whole idea of, well, why do I have to take this class if it's not going to be applied in the program or certificate that I'm applying for? Well, there's a broad range that art encapsulates in, and you don't realize that. So, for example, I actually had a nursing student that questioned me on the very first day of class, like, no offense, but why should we be in this class? I'm in the nursing program. What does, this introduction to art have to do? And I tell them that this class is about how to analyze a work of art, looking at the materials, how it's made, looking at this process, how it's created, how it's formed, how it makes an impact on everything else. But then also what they're doing when they analyze a work of art, when they're looking at it, they're practicing and working on their critical thinking skills, problem solving. It is that memorization, but it's going one step further. It's not just that textbook example. Here's the question, here's the answer. There's so much more open-endedness in art. And that will really be applied into all these other facets that you're dealing with. You could have the people that are like the OJTs or on the job trainees, and they're just learning as they go. And then there's the people that learn from the textbook. But what you're not really thinking about or considering is that bridging the gap between those two in this academic setting, you're really sort of opening it up to a whole new world of questioning why that's there, and maybe even doing a better job than what you've seen, or improving upon that, problem, whatever it might be. And some of those students, like whether they're in nursing or not, they do have that required elective, but it's kind of funny, their reflection in the class, it changes at the end of the semester, because I'll ask them and say, okay, for those of you that aren't going into art, that aren't an art major, STEM, science, allied health, all that stuff, I was like, what do you think? Does this course apply? And 100% of the time, all the time, they say yes. And they're so happy they took this course, and again, it goes back, it's a refresher as well. It kind of resets their mind to think in different ways that they didn't think before. And I think it helps them excel in those studies of what they're doing on the side, so that they can think in a different way. So question being, what kind of resources me, myself, or the art department can provide for our students? Well, we handle a lot of different things right now. One, we actually have the Donna Service Art Gallery, and each semester we have different events, different artists come in, whether it's a solo exhibition, group exhibition, and you can take a look at the artwork that's being presented on campus. Sometimes we have student shows that are led by current students on campus, so you can see the work that they're actually doing. And you can see some of them are in a painting class that are in the nursing program, or things like that. So you can see what other students are currently doing and kind of getting an idea of what you can do as well. Also thinking about that idea of taking a class that might be a little bit of a refresher, or to help reset that inner core of being a student, that you're not so overwhelmed with all these main core classes, that this is going to sort of, again, reset that mind, give you a little bit more confidence as you're going through. And it's fun. Who's not gonna love a painting class? Who's not gonna love a ceramics class? Getting your hands on the clay, on the pottery wheel, actually creating something that at the end of the semester you can say, this is mine. I have this object. This is, something that I then created out of this fruition of, art. And then the other things that we also have are like the Savoir Faire. It's a literary and visual arts magazine. I'm one of the co-editors for that. Students can actually submit short stories, poems. We even had just a bunch of different poetry and prose. And then we had a screenplay this past year. And so that was brand new, but a lot of different students coming from different backgrounds adding into this. We've got our digital artwork that's encapsulated in that, fine art, photography. I mean, you name it, it's so open-ended. But there's actually cash prizes awarded for, honorable mentions, first place, second place, grand prize, and all that. So students can actually benefit from being in the magazine, getting that exposure. And one of the other things that we can do, as an art department, and as my colleagues will also attest to in the art department, is that it does create this sort of peaceful time for students to reflect upon what they're doing. And they can really focus on not just the task at hand, but sort of reflect on what they're doing, how they're doing it, how they can improve. And I always say art is sort of a meditation. You can get in the zone, and students see this and they feel a lot better at the end of class. They don't feel frustrated. It's very open, and they feel like they're ready to go on to the next class. And so those art classes, I think, are a staple, bar none, to what we see here. And you can ask any student, or if a student has taken an art class, they'll say one of the 3 art teachers, and they can tell you how much they love those courses.